The chestnut mare stood motionless at the ravine's edge, her reins trailing in the dust, and something about the way her head hung low made Kade Morrison pull his stallion to an abrupt halt on the dusty trail outside Madisonville, Texas. It was late spring in 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dry earth, but the cowboy felt a chill run through him as he noticed the mare's saddle sat empty, stirrup leathers swaying gently in the hot breeze. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the packed dirt with purpose as he approached the nervous horse, speaking in low, soothing tones that came naturally after 24 years of living and breathing the ranching life. The mare nickered softly, her dark eyes wide with distress, and when Kade reached her side and peered over the rocky edge, his heart lurched in his chest. 20 feet below, crumpled against the side of the steep ravine on a narrow ledge, lay a woman in a green riding dress, her dark hair spilled across the stones like ink. She was not moving, and for one terrible moment, Kade thought he was looking at a corpse. But then he saw her hand twitch, fingers curling slightly against the rock. "Hold on," he called down, his voice echoing off the ravine walls. "I am coming to get you." He secured both horses away from the edge and grabbed the rope from his saddle, his mind racing through the mechanics of what needed to happen. The ravine was not impossibly deep, but the walls were treacherous, crumbling sandstone that would give way under careless weight. Kade tied one end of the rope around a sturdy mesquite tree, testing it twice before he began his descent, boots scraping against rock as he worked his way down to where the woman lay. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 21 or 22, with a fine-boned face now pale beneath the dust and a nasty gash across her temple that had bled down the side of her face. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and as Kade knelt beside her on the precarious ledge, her eyelids fluttered. "Easy now," he said softly, his hands moving gently to check for broken bones. "You have taken quite a fall." Her eyes opened, and he found himself looking into irises the color of amber in sunlight. For a moment she seemed confused, disoriented, and then pain flashed across her features and she gasped. "My head," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I know. You are hurt, but I'm going to get you out of here." Kade kept his voice calm and reassuring, even as his mind cataloged her injuries. The head wound was the most obvious concern, but he felt along her limbs carefully and found nothing obviously broken. "Can you tell me your name?" "Zara," she managed. "Zara Thompson." "Well, Miss Thompson, I am Kade Morrison, and I need you to trust me right now. I am going to carry you up, but you need to hold on to me. Can you do that?" She nodded weakly, and he saw determination spark in those amber eyes, despite the pain etched on her face. Kade had always admired courage, and there was something about this woman that spoke of inner strength even in her injured state. He fashioned a makeshift harness with the rope, securing it around both of them so his hands would be free to climb. The ascent was brutal, every handhold uncertain, every foothold tested before he trusted his weight and hers to it. Zara bit back cries of pain, her face pressed against his shoulder, her fingers clutching his shirt with desperate strength. When they finally reached the top and solid ground, Kade lowered her gently to the grass, his muscles trembling from exertion. Sweat soaked his shirt despite the dry heat, and his hands were scraped raw from the climb. Zara's eyes had closed again, her breathing rapid and shallow, and he knew he needed to get her to town quickly. "Miss Thompson," he said, touching her shoulder gently. "Zara, stay with me now." Her eyes opened again, focusing on his face with effort. "My horse," she murmured. "Cinnamon. Your mare is safe. I'm going to take you to the doctor in Madisonville. It is not far." Kade lifted her as carefully as he could, feeling how light she was in his arms, and carried her to his stallion. Getting mounted with an injured woman was no easy feat, but he managed, settling her across his lap, her head resting against his chest. He tied her mare to his saddle and started toward town at a pace fast enough to matter, but careful enough not to jostle her too badly. Madisonville was a modest town that had grown up around the cattle trails, with a main street of weather-worn buildings and a population that knew everyone's business by sundown. Kade rode straight to Doc Anderson's house on the edge of town, calling out before he even dismounted. The doctor, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and steady hands, came out onto his porch and took in the situation immediately. "Bring her inside, quickly now," Doc Anderson directed, holding the door wide. Kade carried Zara into the examination room, a clean, sparse space that smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. He laid her on the table as gently as he could, stepping back reluctantly as the doctor moved in to examine her. Doc Anderson worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the head wound, checking her pupils, running his hands along her limbs and ribs. "She has a concussion, certainly," the doctor said after several minutes. "Some bruised ribs, various contusions, but I do not think anything is broken. The head wound is not as bad as it looks. Head wounds always bleed impressively. She was very lucky, young man. If you had not found her when you did, lying out in this heat, it could have been much worse." Relief flooded through Kade, loosening tension he had not fully acknowledged in his shoulders. "Will she be all right?" "With rest and proper care, yes. She needs to stay quiet for several days at least, and someone should watch her through the night to make sure the concussion does not worsen." Doc Anderson cleaned his hands and looked at Kade thoughtfully. "Do you know this young lady? Does she have family in town?" "I never met her before today. She said her name is Zara Thompson, but that is all I know." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "Thompson? That would be the new school teacher. She arrived just 2 weeks ago from Houston, took over the schoolhouse after Miss Garrett married and moved to San Antonio. She has been boarding at the Hendersons' place." Kade absorbed this information, looking down at Zara's pale face, now cleaned of blood and dust, a white bandage wrapped around her head. The new school teacher. That explained the quality of her riding dress, the educated cadence of her voice, even in pain. "Should I fetch Mrs. Henderson?" "Yes, that would be wise. But someone should stay with her until then. She should not be left alone." Doc Anderson gave Kade a meaningful look. "I will stay," Kade said immediately, surprising himself with the vehemence of his response. Something about this woman, this stranger he had pulled from a ravine, had stirred something protective and profound in his chest. He told himself it was simply human decency, the obligation any man would feel towards someone he had rescued. But there was an undercurrent he did not quite understand, a pull he could not name. Doc Anderson nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he recognized something Kade himself had not yet acknowledged. "I will go speak with Mrs. Henderson myself. Keep a cool cloth on her forehead, and if she wakes, give her small sips of water. Call me immediately if she seems confused or if she vomits." After the doctor left, Kade pulled a chair close to the examination table and sat down, suddenly aware of how tired he was, how his hands ached from the rope and rock. He dampened a cloth in the basin the doctor had left and laid it gently across Zara's forehead, his rough, work-worn fingers careful against her skin. In the quiet room, he studied her face properly for the first time. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the delicate, fragile way of the dance hall girls or the pampered daughters of wealthy ranchers, but with an elegance that spoke of intelligence and character. Even unconscious, there was something determined about the set of her jaw, something that suggested this was a woman who did not give up easily. Time passed in that suspended way it does in sick rooms, marked only by the changing angle of sunlight through the window and the steady rhythm of Zara's breathing. Kade found himself thinking about the choices that had led him to this moment. He had been riding in from his family's ranch, the Double M, to pick up supplies and check on the sale of some cattle. If he had left an hour earlier or later, if he had taken the southern trail instead of the northern one, he would never have seen that chestnut mare standing at the ravine's edge. Zara Thompson would have died under the Texas sun, and he would have gone on with his life, never knowing she existed. The thought disturbed him more than it should have. Zara stirred, a soft sound escaping her lips, and Kade leaned forward immediately. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe." Her eyes opened, clearer now than they had been at the ravine, and focused on his face. For a moment she seemed frightened, disoriented, and then memory returned. "You pulled me out," she said, her voice stronger now. "I did. You were at Doc Anderson's office in Madisonville. He says you will be fine, but you need to rest." I remember Cinnamon spooked. There was a rattlesnake, and she reared. I could not hold on. Zara tried to sit up and winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. "Careful now. You have got bruised ribs along with that knock on your head." Kade gently pressed her shoulder, and she subsided back onto the pillow. "Your mare is fine. I tied her up outside." "Thank you." Zara looked at him with those remarkable amber eyes, and Kade felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did." "Best not to think about that." Kade offered her a cup of water, helping her take small sips. Doc said you were the new school teacher. A faint smile touched her lips. Word travels fast in small towns. Yes, I came from Houston 2 weeks ago. I have been trying to learn my way around the countryside, but clearly I have much to learn about rattlesnakes. They are common this time of year, especially in rocky areas. You have to watch where you ride. I will remember that. She paused, studying his face with an intensity that made him self-conscious. Kade Morrison, you said your name was? That is right. My family runs the Double M Ranch, about 5 miles north of town. Well, Mr. Morrison, I owe you my life. That is not a debt easily repaid. You do not owe me anything, Miss Thompson. Any man would have done the same. Even as he said it, Kade knew it was not quite true. Some men might have ridden on, not wanting the trouble or responsibility. Some might not have attempted the dangerous descent into the ravine. But he could not have done anything else, and looking at her now, he was profoundly glad he had been there. The door opened, and Mrs. Henderson bustled in, a plump woman in her 50s with worry written all over her kind face, followed by Doc Anderson. Oh, Miss Thompson, you gave us such a fright. She rushed to Zara's side, taking her hand. When Doc told me what happened, I could scarcely believe it. Kade stood, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this feminine concern. Doc Anderson caught his eye and nodded toward the door. Let us give the ladies some space. You have done well today, young man. Outside on the porch, Kade felt the weight of the afternoon settle over him. His shirt was stiff with dried sweat, his hands throbbed, and he realized he had not eaten since breakfast. The doctor clapped him on the shoulder. She will be fine, thanks to you. Mrs. Henderson will take her home and watch over her tonight. You should get yourself some food and rest. You look about done in. I should check on the horses first, make sure her mare did not suffer any injuries from the fall. That is good of you. But after that, take care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup, as my late wife used to say. Doc Anderson smiled. Something tells me Miss Thompson will want to thank you properly once she is recovered. She strikes me as the type who takes her obligations seriously. Kade nodded, not trusting himself to examine too closely why that prospect made his pulse quicken. He tended to both horses, finding Cinnamon sound despite her ordeal, and then delivered her to the Hendersons' small barn, where Mrs. Henderson assured him she would be well cared for. Only then did he allow himself to head to the saloon for a meal, his mind full of amber eyes and a woman's courage in the face of pain. The following days passed in the rhythm of ranch work. Kade threw himself into the physical labor of mending fences, breaking a new horse, helping his father and younger brother with the spring branding. The Double M was a successful operation, built over 2 generations, and there was always more work than daylight. But no matter how tired he was at day's end, his thoughts kept returning to Zara Thompson. He told himself he was simply concerned for her welfare, that it was natural to wonder how someone you had rescued was recovering. He did not examine why he found himself riding into town on errands that could easily have waited, hoping for news. It was nearly a week after the accident when he saw her again. Kade was loading supplies into his wagon outside the general store when he heard a familiar voice call his name. He turned to see Zara walking toward him down the wooden sidewalk, and his breath caught. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her coloring, and though there was still a faint bruise yellowing on her temple, she moved with grace and purpose. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and when she smiled at him, Kade felt that same inexplicable shift in his chest. Mr. Morrison, I have been hoping to run into you, she said, stopping a polite distance away. I wanted to thank you again, properly, now that I am not flat on my back in a sick room. You look well, Kade managed, acutely aware of the dust on his clothes, the work roughness of his hands. I am glad to see you recovered. Thanks entirely to you. Zara's expression grew serious. I have been thinking about what you did, climbing down into that ravine to get me. It was dangerous and you did not hesitate. That kind of courage and compassion is rare, Mr. Morrison. Kade felt heat rise in his face, uncomfortable with the praise. I did what anyone would do. We both know that is not true. She tilted her head, studying him with those intelligent amber eyes. I would like to cook you dinner, if you would allow it. Mrs. Henderson has graciously offered her dining room, and I am told I make a decent pot roast. It seems little enough in return for my life, but it is a start. Every sensible instinct told Kade to politely decline, to maintain the proper distance between a rancher's son and the town schoolteacher, But looking at Zara, seeing the sincerity in her face and something else, a warmth that mirrored the strange pull he felt toward her, he found himself saying, "I would like that very much, Miss Thompson. Zara, please, I think we are beyond formalities, considering you carried me out of a ravine. Then you should call me Kade." He smiled, and she smiled back, and in that moment on the dusty street of Madisonville, with the spring sun warm overhead and the sound of horses and wagons all around them, something began that neither of them fully understood, but both felt deep in their bones. They arranged for Saturday evening, and Kade spent the intervening days in a state he barely recognized. He had courted girls before, had even thought himself in love once with a rancher's daughter from the next county, but this felt different. There was an intensity to his thoughts of Zara, a preoccupation that went beyond simple attraction. He found himself remembering the way she had looked at the ravine, the determination in her eyes despite her pain, the quiet strength she had shown. He remembered the feel of her in his arms, light but solid, real, her fingers clutching his shirt with desperate trust. Saturday arrived clear and warm, the kind of perfect spring evening that made Texas almost forgivable for its summer brutality. Kade bathed carefully, shaved, and put on his good shirt. The dark blue one, his mother said, brought out his eyes. His younger brother, Kevin, watched these preparations with undisguised amusement. "Who is she?" Kevin asked, leaning against the doorframe of Kade's room. "The school teacher, Miss Thompson. I am having dinner at the Hendersons." "The one you pulled out of the ravine last week?" Kevin's grin widened. "Pa said you came home that day looking like you had seen a vision. Now I understand." "Do not start," Kade warned, but there was no heat in it. He and Kevin had always been close, despite the 4 years between them, and he could not quite suppress his own smile. "She must be something special to get you this worked up. You have turned down dinner invitations from half the eligible ladies in the county." "She is," Kade admitted, and saying it aloud made it more real, more frightening. "She is special." Kevin clapped him on the shoulder, his expression growing more serious. "Then do not mess it up, brother. Good women who are also interesting are rare as hen's teeth out here." Kade rode into town with those words echoing in his mind. The Hendersons' house was a neat frame structure with a small garden in front where Mrs. Henderson grew vegetables and flowers. Zara met him at the door, and Kade felt his mouth go dry. She wore a green dress that complemented her coloring beautifully. Her dark hair swept up with small curls framing her face, and she was smiling at him with an expression that held both nervousness and pleasure. "Come in," she said warmly. "Mrs. Henderson has kindly agreed to serve as chaperone while retreating to the parlor to give us some privacy." The dining room was small but comfortable, the table set with care. The promised pot roast proved to be excellent, accompanied by roasted vegetables and fresh bread that Zara admitted Mrs. Henderson had helped her with. As they ate, conversation flowed with surprising ease. Kade asked about her life in Houston, and Zara painted a picture of a city childhood, the daughter of a lawyer and his artistic wife, educated at a women's seminary and trained as a teacher. "But I wanted adventure," she said, her amber eyes bright with passion. "I wanted to see more of the world than the parlors and social calls. When the position here opened up, my parents were horrified, but I was thrilled. The frontier, the open spaces, the sense that life here is still being shaped and formed. It called to something in me." "And how are you finding it so far, apart from the ravine incident?" Kade asked, fascinated by this glimpse into her mind. "Challenging, rewarding, lonely sometimes," she admitted. "I have students ranging from 6 to 15, all in one room, all at different levels. Some of the older boys resented having a woman teacher at first, especially one not much older than them, but we have reached an understanding. I have no doubt you won that respect." Kade could easily imagine Zara standing firm against rebellious students, her intelligence and determination winning them over. "What about you?" Zara leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Have you always ranched? Did you never want to leave, see what else was out there?" Kade considered the question carefully. "I thought about it when I was younger. My mother's brother lives in Denver, and I visited once when I was 18. It was exciting. So many people, so much happening all at once. But I missed the land, the open sky. I realized I belong here, working with my hands, building something that will last. The double M will be mine and Kevin's someday, and I want to make it thrive, make it something to be proud of." That is a good dream, Zara said softly. An honest one. There is honor in that kind of commitment to place and family. They talked long after the meal was finished, about books they had read, about politics and the changes sweeping through Texas after Reconstruction, about their hopes and fears and the small details that made up their days. Kade found himself telling her things he rarely spoke of, his worry that he might not be as capable a rancher as his father, his grief over losing his mother 2 years ago to fever, his belief that the West was changing and men like him needed to change with it or be left behind. Zara listened with absolute attention, asking thoughtful questions, offering insights that showed both empathy and sharp intelligence. When he finally, reluctantly, said he should ride back before it got too late, Zara walked him to the door. In the soft light of the porch lantern, she looked up at him, and Kade saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes, a mix of wonder and nervousness and unmistakable attraction. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said, "and for the conversation. I have not talked like that, really talked, since I left Houston. It means more than you know." "Thank you for inviting me." Kade hesitated, then took a chance. "Would you like to go riding next Sunday? I could show you some of the safer trails, places where rattlesnakes are less common, if you feel ready to get back in the saddle." Zara's face lit up. "I would love that. I refuse to let fear keep me from something I enjoy." "That is what I thought you would say." Kade smiled, and on impulse took her hand briefly, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight tremor that might have been his or hers or both. "Until Sunday, then." Until Sunday. Kade rode home under a sky full of stars, his heart full in a way it had never been before. He was falling in love, he realized. No, that was not quite right. He had already fallen. It had happened in pieces, starting the moment he saw her lying in that ravine and had felt his world tilt on its axis. Every moment since had only deepened the pull, until now he could not imagine his life without her in it, and they had known each other barely more than a week. It should have terrified him, the speed and intensity of it. Instead, it felt right, like coming home, like finding something he had been searching for without knowing he was looking. Sunday arrived with perfect weather, warm but not hot, with a breeze that kept the air moving. Kade arrived at the Hendersons with Cinnamon on a lead, the mare brushed to gleaming. Zara came out wearing a practical split skirt for riding and a white blouse, her hair in a long braid down her back, and Kade's heart did that now familiar jump at the sight of her. "She looks wonderful," Zara said, going immediately to Cinnamon and running her hands over the mare's neck. "Thank you for bringing her. She is a good horse. I checked her over after the accident, and she was sound. What spooked her was not her fault." They mounted up and rode out of town at an easy pace, Kade leading them north toward the Double M, but taking trails that wound through prettier country, along a creek lined with cottonwoods and across meadows bright with wildflowers. Zara was a capable rider, and she relaxed into the saddle as they went, the tension Kade had seen in her shoulders when they first set out gradually easing. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around at the rolling landscape, the vast blue sky. In Houston, everything felt closed in, pressed together. Here, you can breathe. "That is exactly it," Kade agreed. "That is what I missed when I was in Denver, the space to breathe, to think." They stopped by the creek to water the horses and rest in the shade. Sitting on a fallen log, shoulders nearly touching, Kade felt a contentment that was both peaceful and charged with awareness of her closeness. Zara picked up a smooth stone and tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Can I ask you something?" she said, not looking at him. "Anything. Why did you really climb down into that ravine? You must have known how dangerous it was. You could have ridden for help." Kade thought about the question, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "I looked over that edge and saw you lying there, and I just knew I had to get to you. There was no debate in my mind, no weighing of options. It was like every part of me was pointing in one direction, and that direction was down to where you were." He paused, then added quietly, "I am still not sure I can explain it better than that." Zara turned to look at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "I think," she said slowly, "that some people come into our lives and change everything in an instant. I think maybe we recognize something in each other, something important, even before our minds catch up to what our hearts already know." "Is that what happened with us?" Kade asked, his voice low. "I think it might be." She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I know it seems crazy. I have only known you a week, but I feel like I have been looking for you my whole life, and when you carried me out of that ravine, when I opened my eyes and saw your face, something in me said, him, he is the one. Kade's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must hear it. I felt it too. I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe we both are. Zara laughed softly, but her eyes were serious. Or maybe this is what people mean when they talk about love at first sight, when they say you just know. Zara. Kade turned to face her fully, bringing his free hand up to cup her cheek gently. I do not have pretty words. I am just a rancher, and I have spent more time talking to horses than to people most of my life. But I know this. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have already fallen. And if you will let me, I want to see where this goes. I want to court you properly, spend time with you, learn everything about you. Yes, she whispered, leaning into his touch. Yes to all of that. Kade kissed her then, softly at first, a gentle press of lips that sent electricity racing through his veins. Zara made a small sound and kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, over his racing heart. The kiss deepened, still tender but full of promise, full of all the feeling building between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Kade rested his forehead against hers. I have never felt anything like this, he admitted. Neither have I. Zara smiled, and it was radiant, joyful. It is terrifying and wonderful all at once. They spent the rest of the afternoon riding and talking, stealing kisses in the shade of trees, their horses grazing nearby. Kade showed her a high point where you could see for miles in every direction, the land rolling away in waves of gold and green. He told her about his dreams for the Double M, ideas he had for improving the stock, expanding into different markets. Zara talked about her students, the progress they were making, her hope that education could open doors for them that might otherwise remain closed. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they rode back toward town reluctantly. At the edge of Madisonville, Kade stopped and turned to her. Can I see you again soon? I know you have school during the week, but maybe Wednesday evening? We could have supper again, or just go for a walk. Wednesday is perfect. Zara's smile was warm, her eyes soft. I will count the days. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern of seeing each other several times a week, fitting their time together around her teaching schedule and his ranch work. Kade came to know the rhythms of her days, the challenges she faced with particular students, the satisfaction she took in small victories like a struggling reader suddenly understanding or a shy child finding their voice. Zara learned about ranching, about the constant cycle of work that came with raising cattle, the gambles involved in betting your livelihood on weather and markets and the health of animals. But more than the details of their daily lives, they came to know each other in deeper ways. Kade learned that Zara had a fierce temper when roused, but that she also forgave easily, that she was ticklish just below her ribs, that she sang when she was happy and went very quiet when she was sad. He learned that she had come west not just for adventure, but also to escape the suffocating expectations of her social circle in Houston, young women whose highest ambition was a good marriage and whose conversation rarely extended beyond fashion and gossip. Zara wanted more, wanted to matter, to make a difference in the world. Zara learned that beneath Kade's quiet exterior lay passionate opinions about justice and fairness, that he hated bullies and had once gotten into a fistfight defending a Mexican ranch hand from racist abuse. She learned that he had a gift with animals, a patience and intuition that bordered on uncanny, and that he often spent his rare free time reading, everything from agricultural journals to poetry. She learned that he carried guilt over his mother's death, believing irrationally that he should have somehow prevented the fever that took her, and that he worried constantly about living up to his father's legacy. They talked about everything, sharing hopes and fears with a vulnerability that came surprisingly easily. Kade found himself opening up to Zara in ways he never had with anyone else, trusting her with the parts of himself he usually kept hidden, and she did the same, letting him see past the competent, self-assured exterior to the uncertainties and longings beneath. Their physical relationship progressed with a mix of passion and restraint. They kissed often, long, deep kisses that left them both breathless and wanting more. Kade's hands learned the curve of her waist, the softness of her hair. Zara's fingers traced the muscles of his arms, his chest, mapping the strength of him. But they both knew the rules of their time and place, the boundaries that could not be crossed before marriage, and they respected them even as the desire between them grew stronger. It was in early July, nearly 2 months after the accident, that Kade took Zara to meet his family. He had told them about her, of course, his growing feelings impossible to hide, and his father had been cautiously pleased, while Kevin had teased him mercilessly. But bringing her to the Double M, introducing her to his father and brother as the woman he intended to marry, that was a significant step. Zara was nervous as they rode up to the ranch house, a sprawling structure that had been added onto over the years. "What if they do not like me?" she asked, and Kade was charmed by the anxiety in her voice, so different from her usual confidence. "They will love you," he assured her, squeezing her hand. How could they not? Kade Morrison, Kade's father, was a tall, weathered man in his late 50s, with eyes the same gray-blue as his older son's. He greeted Zara with gruff courtesy, but Kade could see him assessing her, taking her measure. Kevin, 20 years old and energetic, was more immediately welcoming, his friendly nature putting Zara at ease. They sat down to dinner, a hearty meal prepared by Mrs. Garcia, the housekeeper who had been with the family for years. The conversation was a bit stilted at first, everyone on their best behavior, but gradually it relaxed. Kendrick asked Zara about her teaching, and she answered thoughtfully, not shying away from the challenges or overstating her successes. Kevin asked about Houston, curious about city life, and Zara entertained them with stories of the differences between urban and frontier living. After the meal, Kendrick invited Kade onto the porch for a private word. The sun was setting, the sky ablaze with color, and father and son stood looking out over the land they both loved. "She is remarkable," Kendrick said without preamble. "Smart, well-spoken, clearly devoted to her work. Your mother would have liked her." "I think so too," Kade said, emotion thick in his throat at the mention of his mother. "You mean to marry her?" It was not a question. "Yes, sir, if she will have me." Kendrick nodded slowly. "Then you have my blessing. But son, understand that it will not be easy. She is educated, came from a comfortable life. Ranch life, especially for a woman, is hard work and often lonely. Make sure she knows what she would be getting into." "We have talked about it," Kade assured him. "She knows, and she wants it anyway. Wants this life, wants me. I am the luckiest man alive." His father smiled, rare and genuine. "Then ask her properly, and let us welcome her into this family." Inside, Zara was helping Mrs. Garcia clear the dishes despite the older woman's protests, chatting easily with her in Spanish that was surprisingly fluent. Kevin caught Kade's eye and grinned, giving him a thumbs up when Zara was not looking. On the ride back to town that evening, Zara was quiet, and Kade worried until she finally spoke. "Your family is wonderful. Your father reminds me of you, strong and steady, and Kevin is delightful. They liked you too, I could tell. Did they?" She sounded genuinely uncertain. "I want them to, Kade. If we are going to build a life together, I want to be part of your family, not some outsider they tolerate." "You could never be an outsider. And yes, they liked you very much. My father said my mother would have approved, and from him, that is the highest praise possible." Zara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. "I miss my own mother terribly sometimes. I wrote to my parents about you, told them I had met someone important. They wrote back full of questions and concerns, warning me not to rush into anything. If they knew I was already planning our wedding in my head, they would be horrified." "Are you?" Kade asked, his heart leaping. "Planning our wedding? Every night before I fall asleep," she admitted. "I imagine what it will be like, being your wife, living at the Double M, building a life with you. Is that foolish?" "Not foolish, perfect." Kade pulled his horse to a stop and turned to face her, the twilight soft around them. "Zara, I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, I want to marry you, build a home with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I want everything." Tears shone in Zara's amber eyes, catching the last light. "I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes. How much? When I think about what would have happened if you had not found me that day, if I had never met you, I cannot bear it. But I did find you. And here we are." Kade reached out and wiped away a tear that had spilled onto her cheek. Marry me, Zara. Not someday, not eventually, soon, as soon as we can arrange it. Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. He kissed her then, there in the gathering dark on the trail outside Madisonville, and it felt like a promise, like the sealing of a vow. When they finally continued into town, they were both giddy with joy and plans, talking over each other about when and where and how. The engagement was announced, and Madisonville buzzed with the news. Some people expressed surprise at the speed of the courtship, but most were genuinely pleased, having watched the romance develop over the summer. Zara's students were excited, already planning what they would wear to the wedding. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears and immediately began organizing, taking it upon herself to ensure the event would be memorable. They set the date for early September, after the worst of the summer heat had passed, but before fall. Work at the ranch became all-consuming. Zara wrote to her parents, extending an invitation, though she doubted they would make the journey from Houston. To her surprise and delight, they wrote back accepting, saying they wanted to meet the man who had captured their daughter's heart and see the life she had chosen. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of preparation. Zara continued teaching, but every spare moment was devoted to planning. She sewed her own wedding dress with help from Mrs. Henderson and several other women in town, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk. Kade and Kevin worked with their father to prepare a suite of rooms in the ranch house for the newlyweds, painting and furnishing them to create a private space. Zara's parents arrived a week before the wedding, and Kade met them with equal parts nervousness and determination. Marcus Thompson was a dignified man, with his daughter's intelligence in his eyes, and Elena Thompson was warm and artistic, her accent still carrying traces of her Spanish heritage. They were clearly concerned, these city people evaluating the frontier and the man their daughter had chosen. But Kade answered their questions honestly and showed them through his actions the depth of his feeling for Zara. It was Marcus who pulled Kade aside 2 days before the wedding for a serious conversation. They walked through Madisonville together, the older man taking in the dusty streets and simple buildings with eyes that missed nothing. "My daughter tells me you saved her life," Marcus said, "that she fell into a ravine and you climbed down to rescue her." "Yes, sir. She also tells me that you are the finest man she has ever met, that you are kind and strong, and that she loves you more than she knew it was possible to love someone." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face Kade directly. "I will be honest with you, young man. When Zara wrote to us about coming west to teach, I was against it. I worried about the dangers, the isolation, the hardships. And when she wrote about meeting you, I worried more. I thought perhaps she was lonely, vulnerable, that she might be making a mistake out of gratitude or fascination with frontier life." Kade's stomach tightened, but he met Marcus's gaze steadily. "I understand your concerns, sir. They are reasonable. But then I arrived here and I saw my daughter, really looked at her, and I saw a woman who is happy in a way she never was in Houston. I saw her with you, the way you look at each other, the way you move together like two parts of a whole. And I spoke with people in town, heard about your character, your family's reputation. So I want you to know, Kade Morrison, that you have my blessing and my gratitude. You saved my daughter's life, and more than that, you have given her a reason to live it fully." Relief and emotion flooded through Kade. "I promise you, sir, I will spend the rest of my life making her happy, protecting her, honoring her. She is everything to me." Marcus extended his hand, and they shook, a covenant between father and future son-in-law. "I believe you, and I trust my daughter's judgment. She always was the smartest of all of us." The wedding took place on a Saturday in early September, in the small church at the heart of Madisonville. The building was packed with people from town and neighboring ranches, all dressed in their Sunday best, the air thick with anticipation and goodwill. Kade stood at the altar with Kevin beside him, as best man, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. And then Zara appeared at the back of the church on her father's arm, and the world narrowed to just her. The dress she had made was perfect, simple and elegant, fitting her form beautifully. Her dark hair was swept up with flowers woven through it, and her face was radiant with joy. As she walked down the aisle toward him, Kade felt tears prick his eyes, overwhelmed by the gift of this moment, this woman, this life they were about to begin together. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion and words that felt sacred. Kade made his vows in a voice that shook with feeling, promising to love and cherish Zara for all his days, to stand by her through whatever came. Zara's voice was clear and strong as she made her own promises, her amber eyes never leaving his face, shining with love and certainty. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife and told Kade he could kiss his bride, he cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her with all the love and passion and tender devotion in his heart. The church erupted in applause and cheers, but Kade barely heard it, lost in the sweetness of that moment, the feel of Zara in his arms as his wife. The celebration that followed was joyful and boisterous, with music and dancing and enough food to feed the entire town. Zara danced with her father, tears streaming down both their faces, and then with Kade, who was not the most graceful dancer but made up for it with enthusiasm. Kevin made a speech that was funny and heartfelt, talking about how his brother had been walking around with a dazed expression ever since pulling a beautiful woman out of a ravine. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears into her handkerchief. Kendrick Morrison stood and toasted the couple, his voice gruff with emotion as he welcomed Zara into the family officially. As the sun began to set, Kade and Zara slipped away from the celebration, riding out to the Double M together as the sky turned gold and pink and purple. They were both nervous and excited, the weight and wonder of what was about to happen charging the air between them. In the privacy of their rooms, Kade took his time, wanting Zara's first experience to be everything it should be. He undressed her slowly, reverently, telling her with every touch and kiss how much he loved her, how beautiful she was. Zara's initial nervousness melted into passion as they explored each other, learning the ways their bodies fit together, the pleasure they could give and receive. It was tender and intense, awkward in moments, and transcendent in others. And when they finally came together completely, both cried out with the overwhelming rightness of it. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Zara traced patterns on Kade's chest and laughed softly. "I think," she said, "that Mrs. Henderson's romantic novels did not quite prepare me for how wonderful that actually is." Kade grinned, pulling her closer. "We should probably practice more, just to be sure we have it right." "Absolutely. Extensive practice seems wise." She kissed his shoulder, then looked up at him with eyes full of love and contentment. "I am so happy, Kade. Happier than I ever imagined being. Thank you for finding me, for saving me in every possible way." "You saved me too," he said softly. "I did not even know I was waiting for you, but I was. My whole life was pointing toward that moment when I saw your horse at the edge of that ravine. Everything before was just preparation for everything after." They made love again, slower this time, savoring every moment, every sensation. And then they lay awake late into the night, talking and laughing and planning the future they would build together. Zara continued teaching through that fall, and Kade threw himself into ranch work with renewed energy, building the life he had promised her. They settled into the rhythms of married life with surprising ease, the initial awkwardness giving way to comfortable partnership. Zara proved more than capable of handling the demands of ranch life, learning from Mrs. Garcia and adapting quickly. She won over the ranch hands with her genuine interest in their work and her willingness to help when needed. By November, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Kade one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and the look of pure joy and wonder on his face made her cry happy tears. He was immediately protective, worrying about her continuing to ride to school, about her overdoing it. Zara laughed and assured him that pregnancy was not an illness, that she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities, at least for now. But as winter settled in and her condition became obvious, she agreed to resign from teaching at the end of January, planning to return after the baby was born if possible. The town threw her a farewell party of sorts, her students presenting her with gifts and cards expressing how much she meant to them. It was bittersweet, leaving work she loved. But Zara was excited about motherhood and knew she could always return to teaching. The baby came in early May of 1879, after a long labor that terrified Kade and exhausted Zara. Doc Anderson delivered the child with Mrs. Garcia assisting, while Kade paced outside, unable to bear Zara's cries of pain, but unable to leave either. Finally, just after dawn, a baby's wail split the air, and moments later, Doc Anderson emerged with a broad smile. "You have a son, Kade, and your wife is tired but well. Go meet your boy." Kade stumbled into the room to find Zara propped up in bed, sweaty and pale but glowing, a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with exhausted joy. "Come meet Kyle Morrison." Kade approached on shaky legs and looked down at his son for the first time. Kyle was red-faced and wrinkled, tiny fists waving, dark hair plastered to his small head. He was the most beautiful thing Kade had ever seen, except for the woman holding him. Kade sat carefully on the edge of the bed and put his arms around them both, his family, his whole world. "He is perfect," Kade whispered, awe thick in his voice. "You are perfect. Thank you, Zara. Thank you for him, for this, for everything." "We made him together," Zara said softly, looking down at their son with infinite tenderness. "Out of love and passion and commitment, he is all the best parts of both of us." Parenthood was exhausting and wonderful, full of sleepless nights and precious moments. Kade discovered reserves of tenderness he had not known he possessed, changing diapers and walking the floor at 3 a.m. with Kyle on his shoulder. Zara balanced motherhood with her other responsibilities, refusing to lose herself entirely in domesticity, but embracing this new role with the same dedication she brought to everything. The years that followed were good ones. The Double M prospered under Kade's stewardship as he implemented new ideas and expanded their markets. Kyle grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his father's eyes and his mother's intelligence. In 1881, Zara gave birth to their daughter, Zelda, who had her mother's dark hair and stubborn streak. In 1883, another son arrived, Kenneth, completing their family. Zara returned to teaching part-time, holding classes in the ranch house for children from neighboring spreads whose parents could not easily get them to town. She loved the work, loved combining motherhood with her passion for education. Kade supported her completely, never questioning her desire for more than just domestic life. They had their struggles, of course. There were lean years when cattle prices dropped, and they worried about making ends meet. There was a terrible winter when Kevin fell ill with pneumonia and nearly died, the entire family rallying around him. There were the normal frictions of married life, disagreements about child rearing and money and 100 other things. But through it all, the foundation of their relationship held strong, built on love and respect and genuine partnership. On their 10th anniversary, Kade took Zara riding along the same trails where they had first ridden together as a courting couple. The children were left with Kendrick, who at 70 was still spry and delighted to spend time with his grandchildren. It was a perfect fall day, crisp and clear, the landscape painted in golds and browns. They stopped at the same spot where Kade had first kissed her, where she had told him she felt like she had been looking for him her whole life. Now, 32 and 31 respectively, they were no longer the young, uncertain people they had been, but something deeper and richer. "Do you ever regret it?" Kade asked, pulling Zara into his arms as their horses grazed nearby. "Giving up your life in Houston, the comfort and ease of it, for this hard life?" Zara looked up at him with those amber eyes that still made his heart skip. "Not for a single moment. This is the life I chose, the life I wanted. You are the life I wanted. Every challenge, every hardship, every moment of exhaustion has been worth it for the joy and love and purpose I have found here with you." "I love you," Kade said, as he had said 1,000 times before and would say 1,000 times more. "More now than the day we married, more than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "That is beautiful," Zara said, smiling. "You always said you did not have pretty words, but you were wrong. You have given me the prettiest words, the most beautiful life." They kissed there in the autumn sunlight, husband and wife, partners and lovers, bound by choice and commitment and a love that had started with a rescue and grown into something that defined them both. The years continued to pass, each bringing its own joys and challenges. Kyle grew into a serious boy with a gift for working with horses, clearly destined to follow his father into ranching. Zelda was fierce and determined, declaring she would be a doctor when she grew up, an ambition that was shocking for a girl, but that her parents supported completely. Kenneth was the sweet-natured baby, content and easygoing, beloved by everyone. Kendrick passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1887, and Kade mourned deeply while taking on the full weight of running the Double M. Kevin had married by then, a capable woman named Sarah, and they had their own growing family on an adjacent property that had been split off for them. The brothers worked together seamlessly, the ranch continuing to thrive under their joint management. Zara became known throughout the region as an educator and advocate for schooling. She wrote articles for educational journals, arguing passionately for better resources for frontier schools. She started a small lending library out of her home, accumulating books through donation and purchase and lending them to anyone who wanted to read. She taught her own children with rigor and love, making sure they had every opportunity to develop their minds. In 1890, when Kade was 37 and Zara was 36, they took a trip to Houston so Zara could show him where she had grown up and introduce him properly to the extended family. It was strange for both of them, Kade feeling out of place in the city's bustle, and Zara realizing how much she had changed, how little she belonged in that world anymore. But it was good too, bridging that part of her past with her present, showing Kade the girl she had been before she became the woman he loved. They visited museums and theaters, stayed in Zara's childhood home with her parents who were older now, but still sharp and engaged. Marcus and Elena had come to love Kade over the years, visiting the ranch regularly and taking pride in their grandchildren. On this visit, Marcus took Kade aside for another conversation, echoing the one from before the wedding. "I wanted to tell you," Marcus said, "that you have exceeded every hope I had for my daughter's happiness. You have given her a good life, a full life, and you have loved her the way every father hopes his daughter will be loved. Thank you for that." "She has given me more than I ever dreamed of having," Kade replied honestly. "I am the one who should be grateful." Back at the Double M, life continued its steady rhythm. The children grew and flourished. Kyle, at 17 in 1896, was already taking on significant responsibility at the ranch. Zelda, at 15, was preparing to leave for nursing school in San Antonio, a compromise since medical school remained out of reach for women. Kenneth, at 13, showed an unexpected gift for numbers and talked about becoming a banker. Kade and Zara watched their children's growth with pride and some wistfulness, knowing that soon the house would be emptier, quieter. But they also looked forward to this next phase, to having more time for just the two of them again. On a summer evening in 1897, they sat on the porch as the sun set. Kade in his rocking chair, and Zara curled up in hers, with her feet tucked under her. They were both reading, comfortable in companionable silence, when Zara suddenly laughed. "What is it?" Kade asked, looking up from his agricultural journal. "I was just thinking about the day we met. You climbing down into that ravine to rescue me, probably thinking I was some foolish city girl who could not handle herself. And here we are, nearly 20 years later, with 3 children and a life neither of us could have imagined." Kade smiled, setting aside his reading. "I never thought you were foolish, unlucky maybe, but not foolish. And I definitely did not imagine, as I was carrying you out of that ravine, that I was holding my future wife, the mother of my children, the center of my entire world. The best things in life are the ones we do not plan for," Zara said softly. "The surprises that knock us sideways and change everything." "Come here," Kade said, holding out his hand. Zara rose and went to him, settling onto his lap the way she had done countless times over the years. They were older now, lines marking their faces, gray threading through their hair, but the connection between them was as strong as ever. Kade wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the comfortable weight of her body against his. "I would do it all again," he said into her hair. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge. To end up here, with you, I would do anything." "Me too," Zara whispered. "Always you, forever you." They sat together as the stars came out, husband and wife, lovers and partners, bound by a love that had started with a rescue and become the foundation of 2 lives well lived. Behind them, the house was full of the sounds of their children, their family, the legacy they were building together. Before them stretched the land they loved, the endless Texas sky, and all the remaining years they would fill with work and joy and the deep satisfaction of a life shared with the right person. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Kyle married in 1900 to a rancher's daughter from the next county, and they built a house on Double M land, continuing the family tradition. Zelda completed her nursing training and returned to Madisonville to work with Doc Anderson, who was training her as his successor. Kenneth went off to college in Austin, studying business and economics, planning to return and help manage the financial side of the ranch. Kade and Zara became grandparents in 1902 when Kyle and his wife had a daughter they named Catherine. The joy of holding that tiny baby, seeing their son become a father, was profound. More grandchildren followed over the years, the ranch filling with new life, new voices, the family growing and branching. In 1905, Madisonville celebrated its 50th anniversary, and Kade and Zara, now in their early 50s, were recognized as pillars of the community. At the celebration, people shared stories of Zara's impact as a teacher, how many lives she had touched through education. They spoke of Kade's integrity as a rancher and employer, his fairness and hard work. The couple stood together, hand in hand as always, moved by the recognition, but most satisfied simply by the life they had built. That night, lying in bed in the familiar room they had shared for more than a quarter century, Zara turned to Kade with tears in her eyes. "What is it, love?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I am just so grateful," she said, "for all of it. For that rattlesnake that spooked Cinnamon, for the ravine I fell into, for you riding by at exactly the right moment. Everything terrible that happened that day led to everything wonderful that came after. How does that make sense?" Kade pulled her close, his heart full. "Maybe it is not about making sense. Maybe some things are just meant to be written in stars or fate or whatever you want to call it. All I know is that I was meant to find you, and you were meant to be found. Everything else followed from that." They made love that night with the tender passion of long familiarity, bodies that knew each other completely, hearts that beat in synchrony. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about the future, about growing old together, about watching their grandchildren grow, about all the years still ahead. Those years were good ones. The Double M continued to prosper, adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values Kendrick had established and Kade and Kevin had reinforced. Zara continued her educational work, her lending library growing into a proper community library with donations from across the region. She wrote a book about frontier education that was published by a university press, bringing her recognition beyond Texas. The children all found their paths. Kyle took over more of the day-to-day ranch management as Kade gradually stepped back. Zelda married a man who supported her career, and they worked together, she as a nurse practitioner, and he as the town's lawyer. Kenneth returned from college and helped modernize the ranch's business practices, ensuring the Double M would remain viable into the new century. In 1915, Kade and Zara celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. They were both 62 now, their hair fully gray, their bodies marked by age and work, but still strong, still capable. They took a trip to San Antonio, just the two of them, staying in a hotel and exploring the growing city, holding hands like young lovers. On their last evening, they sat by the San Antonio River as the sun set, and Kade turned to Zara with something he had been thinking about for months. "Do you remember what you said once, about people coming into our lives and changing everything in an instant?" he asked. "I remember. It was by the creek, not long after we met. I said something about recognizing each other, about hearts knowing before minds catch up. You were right, every word. And I want you to know, Zara, that not a day has passed in 37 years when I have not been grateful for that recognition, for the choice you made to love me, to build this life with me. You have been my greatest blessing, my best decision, my favorite everything." Zara's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the overwhelmed with love kind. "Kade Morrison, you have made me happier than any woman has a right to be. You have loved me through everything, supported my dreams, raised our children with wisdom and care, and never once made me regret choosing adventure over comfort, Texas over Houston, you over anyone else in the world. I love you more today than I did when we stood in that church and promised forever, and I love you less than I will tomorrow." They kissed as the stars emerged overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. When they returned to the Double M, it was to a house full of family, children, and grandchildren gathered for a surprise anniversary celebration. The joy and laughter, the sense of love and continuity, the knowledge that what they had started together would ripple forward through generations, that was the greatest gift of all. The 1920s brought change to Texas and to the Double M. Kevin passed away in 1922, his death sudden and devastating. Kade mourned his brother deeply, grateful they had spent their lives working side by side. The ranch adjusted, Kevin's children stepping up to help maintain the family business. Zara's parents had both passed by then, peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, and Zara grieved while also feeling grateful they had lived long enough to see her happiness fully established. In 1924, Kade and Zara became great-grandparents when Kyle's daughter Catherine had twins. Holding those tiny babies, seeing their family extend into a fourth generation, was profound. They were 71 now, and while they were both still reasonably healthy, they felt their age in ways that reminded them time was precious. They spent more of their time simply being together, taking slow rides through land they had worked and loved for decades, sitting on the porch reading and talking, playing with great-grandchildren who climbed on their laps and demanded stories. Kade taught the children to ride, to respect horses, to read weather signs. Zara taught them to read, to question, to think for themselves. They poured their accumulated wisdom into the next generations, legacy building of a different sort. On a spring day in 1928, 50 years to the month after Kade had first seen Cinnamon, standing at the ravine's edge, they took one last ride together. Kade was 75 and Zara was 74, and mounting up was harder than it used to be, but they were determined. They rode slowly to the place where they had first kissed, where they had promised to court properly, where their love story had truly begun. 50 years, Zara said wonderingly, looking around at the landscape that was both the same and completely changed. Half a century since you saved my life. Since we saved each other, Kade corrected gently. He dismounted carefully and helped Zara down, and they stood together looking out over the rolling land, holding hands as they had done countless times. Do you think we have done well? Zara asked. Built something good? I think, Kade said slowly, that we have exceeded every hope, surpassed every dream. We have created life and love and legacy. We have raised children who are good people, who are raising their own children to be good people. We have worked hard, loved hard, lived hard in all the best ways. What more could anyone ask? To do it all again with you, Zara said, leaning against him. That is what I would ask for if I could. Another lifetime, another chance to fall in love with you. Maybe we will get that chance, Kade said, kissing her forehead. Maybe love like ours does not end when our bodies give out. Maybe it goes on, finds new ways to exist. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other and in memories, surrounded by the land they loved and the life they had built. When they finally rode back to the ranch house, it was with deep contentment, the satisfaction of a race well run, a job well done. Kade Morrison passed away in his sleep in the winter of 1930, his heart simply stopping after 77 years of beating, 52 of them in rhythm with Zara's. She was beside him, as she had been beside him for more than half a century, and though she grieved deeply, she also felt blessed. They had been given so much time, so many years, so much love. Zara lived another 3 years, surrounded by family, spending her days reading and teaching and sharing stories of Kade with anyone who would listen. She spoke often of that day he had climbed into the ravine to save her, how it had felt to open her eyes and see him there, her rescue and her destiny all at once. She made sure her grandchildren and great-grandchildren understood that love was worth every risk, that choosing each other every single day was what made a marriage last. On a spring morning in 1933, Zara Thompson Morrison passed away peacefully in the house she had made a home, surrounded by children and grandchildren who held her hands and told her how much she was loved. Her last words were, "I am coming, Kade," and she went with a smile on her face. They buried her next to him in the family cemetery on Double M land, under the wide Texas sky they had both loved. The headstones were simple, marking the years of their lives and the simple truth that bound them, together in life and in death, forever joined. The Double M continued for generations after them, run by their descendants who carried forward the values and work ethic Kade and Zara had instilled. The story of their meeting, of the cowboy who climbed into a ravine to save the schoolteacher and found his soulmate, became family legend, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But for those who had known them, who had witnessed the deep love and respect they had for each other, who had seen how they never stopped choosing each other even after 52 years of marriage, it was not myth at all. It was simply the truth of two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built a life of meaning and purpose and joy, and who had proved that love at first sight, true love, lasting love, was not a fairy tale, but a possibility for anyone brave enough to reach for it. Their legacy lived on, not just in the land and the cattle and the buildings that bore the Morrison name, but in every descendant who understood that family was worth fighting for. That love was the foundation of everything good, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, from moments of crisis that become moments of grace, from a horse standing at the edge of a ravine and the cowboy who stopped to investigate, who climbed down into danger, and who saved not just a life, but found his own purpose, his own home, his own heart reflected back in amber eyes.